it has cycles to get you clean, to get what's the contents of it clean. And so I just appreciate you sharing that process with the listening audience today. And I would like at this time, if you don't mind, Dee, can you share with us, because your life is so rich and full and, just the things you've shared so far, can you just tell us who inspires Dee Bowden? Who inspires you to go into these places, even when these doors are opening for you right now? What is your inspiration, and who are those role models in your life?
Well, thanks, Candace. That's a great question. So my inspiration are the 5 people. Unfortunately, they're not here anymore, but they're the 5 people who raised me. It's my mother, my father, my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my best older friend. They were the 5 people, who raised me. So to be transparent, my mother had sickle cell anemia. My mother was sick most of my growing up years. So my mother's inspiration for me is that despite her illness, she was still a mom, she still took care of us, and she fought a really good fight to deal with an illness that could be very crippling at times. And so anybody who knows about sickle cell, it can be very debilitating. And so the fact that she fought that fight and did that for me and showed me that despite my illness, I'm still here was one. My dad was my inspiration because my dad worked 2 jobs. My dad worked 2 jobs to make sure that I got the best education. So I was fortunate to go to private schools, to go to private college, and to get a master's degree. So my dad's principles of working hard and family first and getting up even when you don't feel like it, he was another inspiration. My grandmother, because she came when my mother was sick, she would come up and take care of me for months at a time. And she's one of the reasons because I got to learn about God, because she modeled having daily time with God every day. I think at 5 or 5:30, she took her Our Daily Bread book. She would sit down for 30 minutes. Her and God would go hang out, and then she'd come back and we'd do life. And like one of my favorite memories of her was making chocolate chip cookies as a little girl, because that was something that was just kind of cool. When she finished hanging out with God, we'd make cookies. So cool thing. My granddad, because he was also a believer, and then my best older friend was my mentor. She was the person that watched me grow up when I was 12 until she passed. I was 43. She's the person who taught me my first budget. Helped me get my first apartment. She's the reason I have my master's degree today. And she also was another influencer in terms of me getting a relationship with God, because I had a part in my life where I kind of was buck wild and went off track for a little while, and she was like, "We raised you better than that. We need to get you back here." And she knew, kind of like a lion does with its cub, she kind of grabbed me and shook me a little bit. She's like, "You need to come home. I need you to come back. I need you to come back to church. I need you to get your life straight. And then I want you to go back to school," because she knew that me putting my energy into school would be life-changing, and she was right. And so she was the one that actually encouraged me to come back to church and join the church and get baptized and then eventually go back to school. And she's the reason I have my master's degree in business today.
That is fantastic, Dee, what you shared. And I appreciate you sharing about sickle cell anemia. That is something really near and dear to my heart, and bringing about sickle cell awareness, which is really much needed to hear more about that in the community. Also, when you talk about your role models, which are incredible, and those type of individuals of stature, they truly should be carved in stone, so that their life legacy of servant leadership and sacrifice might never be lost to mankind. But just going back a little bit when we talked about economics, and when you look, spiritually speaking, in the Word of God, there's about 500 verses on prayer, 500 verses on faith. Mm-hmm. But there's more than 2,000 verses on money. Mm-hmm. So God is trying to show us something, even through His parables. And even when it talks about, when Jesus talked about money, He spoke about that more than He did heaven and hell combined. So He is really trying to show us something about, it's like about 11 of 39 parables that talk about money. And even when you look at the Gospel of Luke, it talks about money. It's one of every 7 verses. So we have to be mindful of that, about the financial keys that's in the scriptures and in the Word. But you have to stand on it. And so even what you brought up about, business and being consistent and having a branding techniques, we have to be consistent. We have to be flexible. We have to remain relevant in this fast-changing world of marketing. And the key is consistency. But we have to set standards even for our brand. And some people, need a well-executed plan of tactics and brand strategies, because some businesses tend to put the cart before the horse. But we have to focus on our branding strategies, but be consistent out there when it seems like other people are really not paying attention. But the key is that you be consistent, because we are our brand. So you are sharing such things of noteworthy. And this is the integral part of taking our businesses to the next level. And by you being a network and you know how to build relationships with people, that's key. Because when people really know about people skills and networking, they are very successful people, very successful. And so that is the key. If you're successful with that, the finances is going to come in. And I like this quote by Jim Roque. He says, to have more than you got, you have to become more than you are. Success is something you attract by being an attractive person. So we truly are grateful for the keys that you have given us today. And I know this is going to change someone's life and really help propel their business to the next level. And Dee, what are the root cause of limited patterns of thought that impact effective entrepreneur and solution-based personal and business outcomes?
Can you repeat that for me? I didn't catch all of that. That was a great question. I didn't catch it all, though. I'll make sure I answer it.
What are the root cause of limited patterns of thought that impact effective?
Let me start right there with the root cause of limited thought.
Yeah.
I think what happens with limited thought is this. Unfortunately, you've got people that have been in situations either caused by them or unfortunately they're in them, and they've made a decision that this is all I can do, be, or have. They may or may not have been exposed to anybody telling them they could do differently or they could have differently. Now, unfortunately, we have, people say, oh, you can just change your thoughts. Well, here's the thing. If you could just change your thoughts, everybody, like I just snapped my fingers, would change their thoughts. The whole process of changing limiting beliefs starts with getting some new information, kind of what I shared earlier. That would be part one, is that the fact that people have to acknowledge that they're limited because of what they have chosen to believe. And then number two, they may or may not have been exposed to new information. And then number three, even if they are exposed to the new information, have they decided that they want this new change more than they want what they have right now? So that was part one. What was your second part?
And the second part of it is that what impact effective entrepreneur and solution-based personal business outcomes. How does that impact?
Well, if you have, okay, I think it's this way. If you have limited thoughts, and how it impacts your business is this. If I actually, you know what? Can I answer that question by telling a short story?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So, limited thoughts and how it impacts your case. So years ago, I worked for a small IT firm called Amherst Technologies. I was a collector part-time, and I worked from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m. And hopefully your listeners will get something from this. They had $8 million in outstanding sales. This is a true story. $8 million in sales, $8 million in outstanding sales. They gave it to me to collect. I figured out how to uncover $6 million in 60 days. As brilliant, as significant as that is, it still wasn't enough to change what had already been going around the company. Because think about it. If you're a business owner and you have $8 million in sales, wouldn't you want to know how come your money hasn't come in? I think I would. I would want to know, hey, how is it that you made these sales but your money didn't come in? And there was something in the flow of between the comptroller, the director of sales, and the collection team. Nobody was asking, how did we get here? And nobody was really willing to do the work to uncover it. So to your question about how do you change it from limiting beliefs, you have to be willing to do the work to uncover how did you get here? How did this happen? So even though myself, I collected $6 million in 60 days, the company still went out of business. If you Google the company Amaret Technologies, they don't exist. Merrimack, New Hampshire, they don't exist. What comes up is their logo. The reason I'm sharing this story is because even though they were successful in making those sales, no one in the management team seemed to be concerned enough that, wow, we still have this much money outstanding, and how did this happen, number one. Number two, even though you have a team of collectors that are working to collect this money, nobody was willing to do the extra work to figure out the disconnects. I mean, I did, but even though I did that, it wasn't enough to save the company. And number three, you have to wonder, how is it that a comptroller or a CFO or a management person could not care enough to want to fix the disconnects and make sure that people stayed employed? It didn't matter to them, and so unfortunately we all lost our jobs.
So you were pretty much able to get to the root of it.
I was able to figure out, so like I said, they gave me $8 million to collect. I figured out $6 million in 60 days, and I figured out by figuring out the disconnects. There was a disconnect in sales, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and contracts. But the bigger disconnect was that the mindset that went with how come this money is still outstanding, they weren't willing to hear that because it was like, I don't really care. Well, if you're a business owner, you have to care about the state of your flocks. You got to know about your accounts. You can't stick your head in the sand and not care, because that's a limiting belief. When you say I don't care, that's a limiting belief. You have to care, and sometimes caring can be painful. It can be excruciatingly painful. But if you don't want things to change, then don't care, and they will stay exactly the way they are. That's a limiting belief. But if you want it to be different, then you have to make some different choices.
That is quite deep. And then you are actually changing the trajectory of business and creating a whole different paradigm in business aspect and finance, to be able to give us a chance to look at things a little bit different across the spectrum, even when it deals with finance and receivables, as you mentioned, and contracts and things like that. So that really helps the listening audience look at things in a different way. So you are really getting to the root cause, and this is the whole idea of Millionaires in Training. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to emancipate the minds of the people so they can be able to think differently. And so once they think differently and be able to see things and get to the root of situations and not have that type of victim mindset that can cripple people, because a lot of people really hadn't moved to the next level because of fear. And fear immobilizes us, and fear paralyzes us. And they want to start business, they want to connect with people, but they have this fear factor. So what you're sharing with the listening audience, it tends to boost the morale of our audience, that it was like, wow, this is something I need. There's a light bulb in my head right now that, okay, this is quite freeing. And this is a liberating type of message for those who catch hold of what you're sharing. Truly it is. And what you shared, Dee, is profoundly simple, but simply profound way of leaving a lasting impression in the hearts and minds of our target audience. And also, Dee, you are the founder of BCS Solutions, a revenue recovery consulting firm that helps small companies improve their cash flow by addressing the accounts receivables past due invoices. And I'm aware that you're a committed-minded professional, performance-driven, extremely energetic woman producing your own unique work. And you have such a compelling vision. What is your compelling vision of how to develop leadership strategies?
Oh, that's a great one. Number one, to become a leader, you have to be teachable. You have to be coachable. It's easy to slap the label called founder, CEO, president, etc. But if you haven't been in school, whether physically, by books, by mentorship, by coaching, haven't surrounded yourself with other people that are already successful where you want to be, you're not going to be a leader. Number two, leaders are people that lead by example. Being a leader, to me, means being a servant. You got to be willing to do the work. If you say I'm the leader, but you will never roll up your sleeves, you will never jump in there and help somebody untangle an issue, you will never do what seems uncomfortable, then how are you going to lead somebody? I can't follow you if you won't show me what you did to get there. You got to be willing to be transparent. I think you need to be open. I think you need to be educated.